Walk into almost any supermarket and the experience feels completely ordinary. Rows of cereal, bottles of soda, coffee, detergent, snacks, toothpaste, hundreds of brands all competing for your attention. You walk down the aisle, glance at a few options, reach out, and make a choice. It feels like one of the smallest, freest decisions a person can make. But there is a question you almost never stop to ask. Why was that product there in the first place? Not why it was somewhere in the store. Why was it on that exact shelf? Why was one brand sitting directly at the height of your eyes while another was down near the floor? Why did one product get the prime spot at the end of the aisle while its competitor vanished somewhere in the middle? Why did one brand get 3 feet of shelf and another just a few inches? And why were some products never given any space at all? Most of it is the result of deliberate commercial decisions. A supermarket may look like a room full of food. Economically, it is something stranger. It is a marketplace within a marketplace. And one of its most valuable assets is not the food on the shelves. It is the space around the food. This is the 6th case file in our look at the invisible systems that quietly shape the modern world. And it begins with a simple realization. You experience the moment of choosing. But almost everything that decided which choices you were even offered happened long before you walked through the door. To understand how a shelf became so valuable, you have to go back to a time when it barely mattered at all. Step into a grocery store a little more than a century ago, and it would feel completely foreign. Most goods sat behind a counter. You told a clerk what you wanted, and the clerk fetched it for you. Flour, sugar, coffee, soap. You did not wander through a wall of competing packages because there was no wall of competing packages. There was a person standing between you and the products, and that meant the most important selling space in the store was not a shelf. It was the conversation with the clerk. Then, in 1916, a man named Clarence Saunders opened a store in Memphis, Tennessee, with a name as odd as his idea, Piggly Wiggly. And the concept was radical. Instead of asking a clerk to gather everything, customers would walk through the store themselves, pick products directly off open shelves, drop them into a basket, and pay at the end. Today, that sounds like the very definition of a grocery store. At the time, it was a genuine revolution. And it is widely credited as the first true self-service store, though a lesser-known shop in California may have narrowly beaten it to the idea. Self-service spread with astonishing speed because it slashed the cost of running a store and let a single location serve far more people. But it did something far more profound than save labor. It removed the clerk from between the customer and the product. And in that instant, the product had to sell itself. Packaging suddenly mattered. Brand recognition suddenly mattered. Being seen suddenly mattered. The shelf had quietly become a silent salesperson, pitching to every shopper who walked by without saying a word. Think about what happens when hundreds of products are lined up beside one another. They begin to compete visually. Color, shape, lettering, size, logos, claims. Everything printed on a package becomes part of a sales pitch. The aisle becomes an advertising environment with one enormous advantage over any billboard or television commercial. A commercial tries to influence you hours or days before you shop. The shelf reaches you at the exact moment you can actually buy. It puts the product within arm's reach at the precise second the decision is being made. That makes physical position extraordinarily valuable. And over the decades, the number of things fighting for those positions exploded. Advances in manufacturing, refrigeration, transport, and packaging let stores offer dramatically more products. One kind of toothpaste became dozens. One cereal became an entire aisle. One detergent became a wall of competing formulas, scents, sizes, and prices. But while the number of products kept multiplying, the buildings did not grow to match. There are only so many aisles, only so many end caps, only so many spots near the checkout, and only so much space directly inside a shopper's natural line of sight. When the supply of products seeking space grows faster than the space itself, that space becomes scarce, and scarce things become valuable. The shelf had become real estate, and just like real estate, not every location is worth the same. A storefront in the heart of a city is not the economic equal of one on a quiet side street, and the same is true inside a store. Some spots get more foot traffic, some are simply easier to notice. The display at the end of an aisle can be seen even by shoppers who never walk down that aisle. The area by the checkout catches people who are standing still with time to notice a small, cheap item within reach. A position in the middle of a category surrounded by competitors can draw more of the eye than a spot tucked away at the edge. But here, a warning is important because retail is full of tidy little myths that get repeated as if they were laws of nature. Eye level is buy level. Children's products are always placed down low. The milk is always hidden at the very back to force you to walk through the whole store. Each of these contains a grain of truth in certain situations. None of them is a universal rule. Real store layouts vary enormously, shaped by the economics of each category, by how customers actually move, by operational realities, by supplier agreements, and by local demand. The real system is far more sophisticated and far less cartoonish than a list of supermarket tricks. To manage all of this space deliberately, retailers developed one of the most important invisible documents in all of commerce: the planogram. A planogram is a detailed map of a shelf. It can specify exactly which product goes where, on which shelf, at which position, how many units face outward, how much width each brand receives, and which products sit next to which. Where you see a wall of shampoo, the retailer sees centimeters of productive space, and every centimeter can be measured by what it delivers: sales, profit margin, how fast the stock turns over, how reliably it stays available. Data slowly transformed shelf management from gut instinct into cold analysis, and it hardened one powerful idea: shelf space has an opportunity cost. Every inch given to one product is an inch taken from another, which means every product has to justify the space it occupies or lose it. As individual stores grew into regional chains and regional chains grew into vast national retailers, something else shifted: power. Getting your product into one independent grocer is helpful. Getting it into thousands of stores under one banner can transform a company overnight. But it also means that a single retailer now controls access to millions of customers, and losing that relationship can be devastating. The big retailers understood exactly what they held. They controlled the one thing manufacturers could not get on their own: access to the shopper at the moment of purchase. And that control could itself be turned into money. Which brings us to a mechanism most shoppers have never heard of, and it is where the ordinary supermarket aisle becomes an economic battlefield. Imagine you have invented a new snack. You are convinced it tastes better than anything out there. You find a manufacturer, design the package, build up inventory, and win over investors. Now you walk into a major supermarket chain expecting the only real question to be whether customers will like it. But the retailer is asking a very different question. What does it cost us to give this unproven product a chance? Because a new item consumes shelf space that a known seller could have used. It has to be entered into inventory systems, moved through warehouses, tracked, labeled, and merchandised. And if it fails, the retailer has sacrificed space that a reliable product could have filled. So in parts of the grocery industry, a supplier may offer the retailer a payment, a discount, or some other financial concession in exchange for getting a new product onto the shelves or into a promotion. These payments are commonly called slotting allowances. At the simplest level, it can sound almost like rent. A supplier wants valuable shelf space, the retailer controls it, and money helps open the door. But the real system is far more tangled than simply buying a better spot. And it sits alongside a whole web of other arrangements: promotional funding, temporary discounts, advertising support, volume rebates, and more, which are all related but not the same thing. So when someone says brands pay supermarkets for shelf space, there is truth in it, but that short phrase hides an enormous and complicated commercial machine underneath. There is a genuine argument for why the system exists. From the retailer side, every new product is a gamble, most new products fail, and introducing one carries real cost and real risk. A slotting allowance can be seen as a way of sharing that risk. The manufacturer is effectively saying, "We believe in this enough to help pay for the chance to prove it." That is the strongest case in its favor. But there is another side. Picture two companies launching competing products. One is a giant corporation with deep pockets, established relationships, and dedicated sales teams. The other is a small startup whose product might genuinely be better, but which has very little cash and almost no leverage. For the giant, these payments are just a normal cost of doing business. For the startup, the very same cost can become a wall it cannot climb. And that raises an uncomfortable question that sits at the center of this whole story. Is the shelf choosing the best products or the strongest suppliers? The honest answer is that it is usually some of both. This is important because it would be too easy and simply wrong to conclude that your choices are fake. Consumers still matter enormously. A product nobody wants will fail no matter how good its shelf position is, and retailers have every reason to stock the things people actually buy. Manufacturers cannot simply purchase permanent success, but before consumer demand can do its work, there is an earlier layer, a filter. Someone decides what enters the store, what gets space, how much, and where. And only after all of those decisions have already been made do you arrive, push your cart down the aisle, and choose from what was placed in front of you. This reveals something genuinely strange about a supermarket. We assume the shopper is the store's customer, and of course, you are. But the store also controls access to something manufacturers desperately want, which is you. That creates a second commercial relationship running in the opposite direction. Manufacturers sell products to the retailer, but the retailer also provides manufacturers with something valuable: distribution and visibility and access. Money flows one way when the store buys inventory, and through allowances, promotions, and rebates, value flows back the other way. Grocery economics is far more intricate than buy for $1, sell for $2, keep the difference. A modern retailer's profit can depend on an entire web of terms wrapped around each product. And the bigger the retailer grows, the more of that web it can bend in its favor. What this really means is that a supermarket is not simply a seller of groceries, it is a platform. It sits in the middle, controlling the physical marketplace where shoppers and suppliers meet, and it earns from both sides. Long before Amazon, long before search engines and app stores, grocery retailers had already discovered the quiet power of controlling access between the people who make things and the people who buy them. That insight has two consequences worth noticing. The first is that the shelf can create an illusion of endless competition. You may see dozens of different brands of snacks or cleaning products and feel spoiled for choice, without realizing that many of those brands belong to just a handful of enormous corporations. The variety is often real on the surface and far more concentrated underneath. The second consequence is stranger still, because increasingly the retailer is not only the referee of this marketplace, it is also a player in it. Supermarkets now sell their own private label products, store brand milk and pasta and coffee and cleaning supplies, which compete directly against the national brands whose shelf placement the retailer itself controls. That does not automatically mean the store treats its own products unfairly, since it still has strong reasons to stock the brands customers love. But it creates an unusual tension. The company running the marketplace also competes inside it. If that sounds familiar, it should. It is the same pattern people now debate about online marketplaces that sell their own products alongside everyone else's. And that is the deeper point, because this old physical system turns out to be the blueprint for the digital world we now live in. Everything that plays out on a supermarket shelf is playing out again right now on your screens, only faster and at enormous scale. Online, brands no longer fight for eye level. They fight for the first search result. The end cap becomes the featured carousel. The checkout impulse buy becomes the recommended add-on. The promotional island becomes the sponsored listing. The planogram becomes the ranking algorithm. And shelf space becomes screen space. But the digital shelf can do something the metal one never could. A physical aisle is mostly the same for everyone who walks through it. A digital shelf can rebuild itself instantly for every single person based on what you have searched, what you have bought, where you are, and what you did 5 minutes ago. The old supermarket asked, what products should we put in this aisle? A digital platform can ask a far more powerful question. What single product should we show this specific person right now? The first optimizes space, the second tries to predict behavior. And that is why data became so precious, because the better a platform can guess what you will do, the more efficiently it can arrange your attention, and the more that arrangement can be sold. Sponsored products, promoted listings, retail media, search advertising. The names differ, but the asset underneath is the same. access to your attention at the exact moment you are deciding. Selling that access has quietly grown into a business worth well over $100 billion a year, an entire advertising industry built on the digital descendant of the humble shelf. It would be easy to hear all of this and conclude that it is manipulation, that there must be a villain, but that would be too simple and it misses the more interesting truth. A supermarket genuinely needs organization. Without some filtering, shopping would be overwhelming, popular products would run out, and no one could navigate the store at all. A streaming service that displayed every title at random would be useless. A marketplace that showed millions of products in no order would be impossible to search. Organizing choice is not sinister, it is unavoidable. The important question is never whether our choices are being arranged, because they always are. The important questions are who is doing the arranging, according to which incentives, and who benefits from the result. That may be the single most useful way to understand any invisible system. Do not start by hunting for a conspiracy. Start by following the incentives. The retailer wants profitable space. The manufacturer wants visibility. The shopper wants convenience and value. The platform wants engagement. The advertiser wants attention. Each one behaves rationally, pursuing its own goals. But when all those incentives collide, they produce systems that no single person fully designed or controls. The supermarket shelf is one. The recommendation engine is another. The search page, the social feed, all the same. These systems do not require secret meetings in a back room. They emerge on their own simply because everyone is responding to the incentives in front of them. So look back at where we started. The shelf that seemed like plain furniture turned out to be real estate. The real estate turned out to be a marketplace. The marketplace turned out to be a platform, a data engine, an advertising surface. But underneath every one of those layers sat the same scarce, precious resource: attention. The manufacturer never really wanted 12 inches of metal shelving. It wanted you to notice the product. The advertiser does not truly want a rectangle on a screen. It wants you to notice the message. The physical space is valuable only because your attention passes through it. That is the real asset. That was always the real asset. So the next time you walk through a supermarket, look past the products for a moment and notice the architecture. Which brands dominate the shelf? Which ones get multiple facings? What sits on the end cap and what sits beside the store's own brand? What is being promoted and what is quietly missing? Then ask the one question almost no one ever asks. Not which of these should I buy, but why are these the options I was given in the first place? Because once you learn to see the architecture behind your choices, you start seeing it everywhere. On your phone, on your television, in your search results, across every marketplace, and every feed built to decide what deserves your attention next. The modern world offers us more choice than almost any generation in history, but all that choice created a new kind of power. The power to organize it, to rank it, filter it, display it, to decide what appears first and what fades into the background. And that power rarely feels like power at all. It feels like convenience. A shelf, a search result, a recommendation, a feed. Yet behind each one sits a quiet architecture deciding which possibilities ever enter your field of view. You still make the choice, but someone else designed the room in which you make it. And perhaps the most valuable thing in that room was never the cereal or the coffee or anything else sitting on the shelf. Perhaps the most valuable thing was the shelf itself. Not the metal and not the space, but what passes in front of it every single day: your attention. If this way of seeing the world stays with you, taking the ordinary things we move through every day and turning them over to find the machinery underneath, then consider subscribing and staying with us. There are a great many invisible empires out there, quietly shaping the choices you believe you are making all on your own. Case file number 6, closed.